ready when you are.
All righty. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Delivering on Government Efficiency will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone today to today's DOGE Subcommittee hearing on U.S. foreign aid. This hearing comes at an important time, a time where all of us are witnessing billions of dollars in taxpayer waste, fraud, and abuse being exposed across every agency of our federal government. It comes at a time where oversight of U.S. foreign aid has uncovered billions of dollars that have been weaponized in furtherance of globalist far-left ideologies. The American people want change. The American people voted for change. The American people have spoken that they no longer wish to be enslaved by the bureaucracy's agenda of undermining U.S. interest abroad. In 2023 alone, Americans privately donated over $557 billion of their own money. Corporations donated over $37 billion. Foundations donated over $103 billion. That is incredible of the American people. In 2023, nearly 76 million Americans, almost 30% of Americans, formally volunteered through an organization. Volunteered. The government did not make them do that. They did this on their own. Donating and volunteering time is what supports schools and shelters, hospitals and hotlines, food banks, and more across only our country. Not only our country, but across the world. Ask anyone in Western North Carolina. Whether it be individuals, churches, or businesses, the American people are the most generous people in the entire world. And I'm so proud of that. They should be the ones who decide where their money goes. They can choose if they want to donate to a charity, a school, a church, or a nonprofit. They can choose if they want to privately donate to a transgender salon in Mumbai. They can choose if they want to privately donate to the British Broadcasting Corporation. They can choose if they want to privately donate to the Wuhan Institute of Virology through EcoHealth Alliance, or to electric vehicles in Vietnam, or to changing the national census in Bangladesh to be more gender inclusive. That is something they should be able to choose. That is something they should never be forced to do by our government. The Democrat-run USAID should not get to use our federal government, our U.S. taxpayer dollars, as their party piggy bank to push their radical agenda in countries that we have no business giving money to. 96% of all political contributions from USAID employees go to Democrat Party candidates or PACs. That's 96%. Not only is USAID giving $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland, or $50,000 for transgender opera in Colombia, or entrench their left-wing ideology across the globe, USAID has been transformed into an America Last foreign aid slush fund to prop up extremist groups, implement censorship campaigns, and interfere in foreign elections to force regime change around the world. That is the dark truth about USAID. That is the story the American people deserve to know. Not only was USAID never designed to be what it has morphed into, but these things should never have been funded in the first place. In fiscal year 2023, USAID dispersed roughly $44 billion of aid across 160 countries and regions around the world. During the 4 years of the Biden administration, 181 countries received approximately $240 billion in U.S. development aid, with Ukraine being the top recipient. Other top recipients include Ethiopia, Jordan, Israel, and Somalia. So after hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars have been distributed throughout the world, has the world become safer? No. Has the world become more stable? No. Is the perception of the United States around the globe any better? No. But have some of the most anti-democratic principles like censorship and the canceling of elections been funded through USAID because of opposition to the ruling regimes? Yes. Has money through USAID been funneled to terrorists? Yes. Foreign aid from USAID to the UN, particularly the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East, is directly funding Hamas terrorists. Humanitarian relief intended for the Afghan people was diverted to the Taliban. Money intended to support democracy is being used as a slush fund for liberal propaganda supporting terrorist, gender ideology, diversity, equity, and inclusion, climate activism, censorship, and regime change. Do you think this is what the American people think of when they think of foreign aid? Absolutely not. Taxpayer funds have literally been used to undermine U.S. interests and counter American foreign policy goals under the guise of foreign aid. This is unacceptable, and the American people agree. Thankfully, President Trump has taken action to address these issues. The election of President Trump was a clear mandate by the American people that they will no longer tolerate this. He is putting an end to the foreign aid slush fund, ensuring the hard-working American taxpayers' dollars are supporting America First policies and taking care of our own people at home. And we will do the same. With that, I now recognize Ranking Member Stansbury for the purpose of making an opening statement.
All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Elon Musk Chainsaw Massacre, except for this remake of a classic is terrible because it's hurting real people, and its lead character, Mr. Musk, hasn't shown up in front of this committee or Congress at all. We also, of course, call this the Subcommittee on DOGE, or Project 2025, as we'll see here during the Q&A. So today, in this hearing on foreign aid, which the GOP has called, you're going to hear all kinds of wild conspiracy theories, accusations, and unfounded data. It's designed to confuse and provide cover for Donald Trump and Elon Musk in their reckless gutting of our foreign aid and our reordering under the Trump administration of international affairs. But before we dive into the details, I want to zoom out and provide some critical context here about why this is happening. So first of all, let's talk about what happened over the last 2 weeks as the administration took an abrupt about-face in international relations after 64 years of USAID and supporting our allies in Europe, turning its back on long-standing allies and now suddenly embracing and enabling U.S. foreign adversaries. Let's do a little oversight here. Last week, the administration shocked the world as the vice president took to the global stage and addressed European leaders and informed them that the Trump administration believes that the greatest threat to Europe is not the autocratic leader who invaded our Western ally 3 years ago and committed war crimes and atrocities against the Ukrainian people and threatened Western democracy, but instead the VP said it was, quote, a threat from within. He then snubbed our German allies and, in an unprecedented move, tacitly endorsed and then met with a far-right candidate from the German parliament who Elon Musk has spent months backing. This is a party that is so extreme that even conservatives in Germany will not form a government with them. Then, over the weekend, Donald Trump went on a wild rant on social media, embracing Vladimir Putin and repeating Russian propaganda, trying to rewrite history and falsely claim that Ukraine started a war against its own people. Then, on Monday, Trump had the United States of America vote with Russia, North Korea, and China as 4 of the only 8 countries in the world voting in the UN against a resolution supporting Ukraine and affirming Ukraine's sovereignty. When you think about what this means in the context of American history, it's truly astonishing. That same day, which was only 2 days ago, the administration announced that they would proceed with firing another 2,000 USAID workers, even as a court ruled that the administration's dismantling of the aid organization is illegal. And interestingly, one of the main opponents of USAID programs is Donald Trump's buddy, Vladimir Putin. Why? Because among the programs that the U.S. was funding before the funding was frozen was aid to Ukraine, including safe houses on the front lines, a free and open press to help keep people informed what was happening in the war, not to mention refugee resettlement in the United States. USAID was also engaged in democracy building in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, especially with the fall of the USSR. Of course, Mr. Putin didn't like that either. And these investments have been totally decimated over the last several weeks. Over the last 5 years, USAID has funded international aid to 212 countries around the world to promote international peace and security, to help maintain stability, and ensure that we are making good on America's promises. These investments are a fraction of the cost of weapons and defense, and the U.S. in the process is able to help promote national security, stop global pandemics, prevent hunger and mass migrations, and make the world and the United States a safer place. So when we hear conservative allies of Donald Trump repeat wild and unfounded claims about international aid, and we see a coordinated attack by conservative media, think tanks like those who are here today, members of Congress, the administration, we have to ask ourselves, what is really going on here, folks? Why the hell are they so hell-bent on dismantling an organization that has been so vital to American interests and Western democracy for so long? Over the last several days, they have fired thousands of federal employees. It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? And by the way, while they've been doing that, China has actually moved in already to places in South Asia that had their funding cut and is beginning to replace American diplomacy and aid in those places. So as we listen to this hearing today and hear from our witnesses, which I look forward to, I hope that we can get to the bottom of what is actually going on here today. And with that, I look forward to hearing the testimony.
January 24th, Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave an order that came with a waiver for emergency food assistance, which was broadened even further several days later for life-saving services. Secretary Rubio has stated very clearly, we have a blanket waiver, and anybody who tells you they don't understand it, let me repeat it in very simple words. If it saves lives, if it's emergency life-saving aid, food, medicine, whatever, they have a waiver. I don't know how much clearer we can be. And if we're not applying it, then maybe we're not a very good organization and maybe they shouldn't be getting any money at all. Additionally, in-kind food assistance purchased from U.S. farmers is continuing. I'm pleased to introduce our witnesses today. Max Primorak is a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom. He has more than 30 years of international work experience, including as acting chief operating officer at USAID and as a USAID contractor. From 2018 to 2019, he was an administration envoy to Iraq, overseeing a $400 million genocide recovery initiative to facilitate returns of Christians and other persecuted religious minorities. Greg Roman is the executive director of Middle East Forum. He is a frequent commentator about Middle East affairs on both national and international news channels and studied national security and political communications at American University and Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Tyler O'Neill is senior editor at the Daily Signal and author of The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government. He is a writer and commentator on federal policy and has appeared on both local and national news outlets. Finally, Noam Unger is the Director of Sustainable Development and Resilience Initiative at the Center for Strategic International Studies and a Senior Fellow with the Project on Prosperity and Development. He has served at both USAID and the U.S. Department of State. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here to testify today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we will have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Max Primorak for his opening statement.
Madam Chairman, thank you for this opportunity to testify before this very important subcommittee. The views I express here today are my own. Over the past few weeks, indeed, we have been treated to a daily litany of examples of waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer-funded foreign aid. USAID and the State Department used foreign aid as a global platform to push radical and even obscene ideas that have shocked and angered the American people. One cannot help but ask, was there anyone in the room raising their hand to say, this is not a good idea? This might cost us our bipartisan support in Congress. We might lose the trust of the American people. Yes, foreign aid should be a tool to advance our national security interests. In the past, it did. Today, it does not. Frankly, it has been doing harm. While spending more on aid, there is more world poverty and hunger today, more political instability, and developing countries are more beholden to our adversaries. At USAID, I co-chaired an interagency working group that put all aid projects through a counter-China lens. That was dismantled. Instead, the Biden administration wasted billions of dollars on a global green agenda that forced poor countries to rely on China for their energy needs. These countries sought more trade with and investment from the United States to bind our countries closer together. Instead, they got transgender, diversity, and abortion programs that have alienated billions of people. Despite what we hear in the media, there is no linkage between how we do aid and our national security. South Africa has received billions of American aid dollars, yet is China's main Africa partner. South Africa is the S in BRICS. It supports Hamas and Iran and opposes us at every turn at the United Nations. Last summer, Mozambique and Tanzania, other large aid recipients, conducted 2-week military exercises with the People's Liberation Army, expanding Communist China's power projection to the lip of our Atlantic Ocean. 19 of the top 20 USAID recipients are members of China's Belt and Road Initiative. While acting Chief Operating Officer at USAID, I approved strong vetting policies for our humanitarian assistance in countries swarming with terrorists. That too was ignored by the Biden administration. Vast sums of U.S. money have been diverted to fund terrorists in Gaza, Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan. NGOs have been hit with heavy fines for violating our anti-terrorism financing laws. But closer scrutiny is warranted, for the problem is endemic in the aid culture. Last year, USAID launched its $45 million Global Civil Society program based on the social theories of an Italian Marxist. Literally, we have been funding radical NGOs around the world that oppose capitalism, democracy, NATO, and Christianity. None of this is counter China. This is counter America. Again, a resounding yes that foreign aid can be a powerful tool of diplomacy to promote freedom, prosperity, and peace in accordance with our national interest and our values, but not as an instrument of progressive imperialism. Regardless of which party controls the executive branch, aid officials must ensure that every single foreign aid program can pass the Middle America smell test on waste, fraud, and abuse. Aid decisions must always secure bipartisan support. There must be full transparency on who is being funded and what they're doing, not only for the members of Congress, but especially for the American people. The fiduciary failure of our aid officials over the past 4 years has done tremendous damage to foreign aid's credibility and America's standing in the world. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize Greg Roman for his opening statement.
Madam Chairman, ranking member, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Greg Roman, Director of the Middle East Forum, and I'm here because there's a fox loose in the henhouse of our foreign aid system, a system intended to uplift lives abroad that instead has funneled millions of taxpayer dollars to radical and terrorist-linked organizations. If we don't fix these fences now, we risk fueling violence against our allies, our troops, and potentially ourselves. Let me be clear. This is a problem that began under the Obama administration and was exacerbated under the Biden administration. It's a problem that has been brewing across both of these 12 years of governance by a bureaucracy so insulated it can't always tell teachers from terrorists. The result is moral confusion among grant officers who unwittingly, and in some cases, may intentionally bankroll extremist causes. At the Middle East Forum for the last 12 years, we've engaged in oversight over all public spending relating to foreign aid, specifically those relating to Middle East and Islamist causes. And we have identified over $122 million, which has ended up supporting radical organizations or even directly bankrolling organizations which are considered to be terrorists by the U.S. government. That's not pocket change, that's a jackpot for the wrong crowd. In terms of our specific findings, World Vision. Over the past 2 decades, this major evangelical NGO has received nearly $2 billion from USAID. But in 2014, World Vision facilitated a $125,000 grant to the Islamic Relief Agency, an entity linked to Al-Qaeda. Even after a whistleblower raised red flags, USAID rammed through the funding, pressured by World Vision, Sudanese warlords, and even U.S. officials who lobbied to delist the terror organization. Helping Hand Relief and Development. In 2023, only 2 years ago, it received a $78,000 grant from USAID, despite openly working with the terrorists who orchestrated the 2008 Mumbai massacre in India. Worse, the offer and grant came after the USAID Inspector General launched an investigation into a prior grant to the same group. The Jamal Trust Bank in Lebanon. USAID dollars helped pad the pockets of this financial institution, later designated by the U.S. Treasury Department as a terror sponsor for sponsoring Hezbollah. This was no mere oversight. It points to a broken system that handed cash to a future terror financing entity. Some graphical evidence. Behind me, you'll see the Bayadar and Unlimited Friends Association, 2 groups in Gaza. Members of the Gazan charity Bayadar cozy up to senior members of the Hamas Politburo, like Abdul Salam Haniyeh, the son of slaughtered Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, credited as one of the planners of the October 7th attacks on Israel, which kill Israelis and American citizens. Meanwhile, UFA officials have called for their lands to be cleansed from the so-called, quote, impurity of the Jews. You'll see behind me 4 images which don't just show members of Bayadar and UFA associating with members of Hamas, but also USAID officials, employees of the U.S. government, receiving awards because of their cooperation with these 2 Hamas-linked entities. You even have a Facebook post from a few years ago, which is the USAID office in Jerusalem celebrating their relationship with a Hamas entity. I can't find anything more disgusting. And as the ranking member said, we're looking for evidence. This is not a conspiracy. This is a U.S. government communication. Lastly, masking the money trail. Billions of dollars in USAID grants are lumped under miscellaneous foreign awardees, making it impossible for Congress, the media, or the public to track who's really getting the funds. According to public testimony in another hearing in this Congress, a portion of this money has ended up in the hands of al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria. How does this happen? The oversight conducted by USAID is as weak as a house of cards in a windstorm, like handing out cash in a dark alley and hoping it doesn't buy trouble. USAID's vetting system is archaic, relying heavily on self-reported data with no real-time checks or teeth. Primary grantees are entrusted to vet their own subcontractors, even when those grantees themselves might sympathize with radical causes. In places like Gaza or Sudan, groups with blatant extremist affiliations slip through because the so-called gatekeepers have no incentive or even an ideological desire to shut them out. This isn't a glitch. It's a feature of a broken system. And here's the kicker. It's a problem caused by bureaucrats now threatening American interests at home and abroad. It's not just about fraud, waste, and abuse. This is a threat to American national security and potentially criminal, and this committee should take action to ensure that the Department of Justice acts on it and does everything in Congress's power to not just investigate, but refer criminal actions to the proper authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. I now recognize Tyler O'Neill for his opening statement.
Chairwoman Green, members of the subcommittee, the last few weeks have featured revelation after revelation of how our tax dollars have been spent propping up radical left-wing causes across the world. Yet what struck me about the abuse of foreign aid has been the connections with leftist activists here at home. As a senior editor at the Daily Signal, I researched the left's dark money network, which propped up the influence campaign I expose in my book, The Woktopus. I found that leftist elites prop up NGOs that staffed and advised the Biden administration, pushing unpopular policies on the American people through the bureaucracy. In my remarks, I will present 3 examples of how the left's dark money network intersects with just one agency focused on foreign aid, the U.S. Agency for International Development. The views I will express in this testimony are my own. The left's dark money network features George Soros and his Open Society Foundations, the Tides Foundation, and the network of nonprofits established by Arabella Advisors. Right here. These groups, which you can see on this chart, funnel cash to DEI, transgender, and climate alarmist causes, divisive issues that the Biden administration prioritized over addressing the concrete needs of the American people. The left's dark money network has deep ties to USAID, which has rightly received renewed scrutiny under DOGE and after Elon Musk shined a light on it. While the Open Society Foundations has stated that it does not receive funds from USAID or direct USAID's spending, the Soros-founded nonprofit has a long history with USAID. In 2001, the Soros Foundations Network, which became Open Society, listed USAID among its donor partners. Open Society and USAID have jointly funded the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, a news outlet that attacked conservatives for, you guessed it, criticizing Soros. Open Society and USAID also jointly fund the East-West Management Institute. Among other things, the institute launched court changes in Albania that critics allege resulted in the prosecution of Albanian opposition leader Sali Berisha, silencing the opponent of the country's socialist prime minister. Open Society has hired at least 5 former USAID staff, including at least 1 high-level official who worked at USAID providing services amid political transitions in foreign countries. Former USAID Administrator Samantha Power met at least twice with Open Society leaders. USAID has directly funded a different organization in the left's dark money network, the Tides Center. The agency has awarded more than $27 million in grants to the center. You'll find the Tides Foundation right here. The Tide Center has funded many of the leftist groups that influence the Biden administration, and it also operates its own in-house nonprofit called Palestine Legal, which represents anti-Israel rioters in court and gives them legal advice. Former USAID staff have also gone on to work for Arabella Advisors, which is a for-profit company that set up pass-through nonprofits. These groups allow donors to support specific projects without being associated with these projects. One of the nonprofits, New Venture Fund, set up a secretive group called Governing for Impact. Even though Governing for Impact had existed for barely 2 years and did not appear in a Google search at the time, its leaders met with and advised top staff in the Biden administration, executive-level bureaucrats who oversaw the vast federal bureaucracy. Leaders of the Rockefeller Foundation, another funder in the left's dark money network, previously held roles at USAID, including the former administrator, who now serves as the foundation's president. Other USAID staff have gone on to work at the nonprofits that staffed and advised the Biden administration, including the Center for American Progress, the Human Rights Campaign, and the American Civil Liberties Union. Personnel is policy, and these connections between the left's influence campaign on the Biden administration and USAID reveal how woke elites have captured the enterprise of foreign aid. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions, and I will inform this committee and the public watching that if, pardon? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Unger. Apologize. I didn't mean to skip over you. I now recognize Mr. Unger for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member Stansbury, distinguished members of the subcommittee, I am honored to share my views with you. They are my own and not those of my current or former employers. I have served at USAID and the State Department in multiple roles and in non-governmental positions focused on U.S. foreign aid reform and global development. My government service took place during the administrations of Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. Every U.S. administration since World War II has wanted to shape foreign aid in line with its goals. But strangling the system into extinction is akin to unilaterally disarming at a time of mounting geopolitical competition for partnerships globally. Throwing away our toolbox does not make us safer or well-positioned to influence the world. Our set of foreign aid tools reflects enlightened self-interest. With it, the U.S. countered communism and enhanced the education, farming productivity, and health of people around the world while also saving lives. Our international AIDS and malaria programs have collectively saved more than 35 million lives over the past couple decades. U.S. assistance has also built partnerships and economic growth, so much so that 11 of America's 15 biggest trading partners were former recipients of U.S. foreign assistance. We are now in a period of renewed geostrategic competition. China has been vying with the U.S. for partnerships across the global south, inking deals where it can. China can and will fill soft power voids left by the U.S. Other potential threats to our security are also connected to developing countries and fragile states. From the potential resurgence of ISIS in the Middle East to the spreading influence of Islamist militants and Russian mercenaries across the Sahel. On the eastern edge of Europe, Russian aggression may continue to grow unchecked, and in Colombia, the strife from neighboring Venezuela is spilling over to yield the worst violence in a generation. With that backdrop, the administration has abruptly and collectively disabled U.S. tools of foreign assistance. The White House has said it is cutting programs that do not benefit Americans. But their approach is dismantling many programs that help Americans, thereby cutting off our nose to spite our face. This is evident in many ways. First, the government has purchased more than $2 billion in food aid annually from American farmers, and American farms supply more than 40% of the food aid USAID sends around the world. But with the foreign aid freeze and stop work order, rice, wheat, and soybeans are going to waste in transit and in ports. In Houston alone, hundreds of tons of American-grown wheat have been stranded. The recklessness of the current approach is evident in health efforts, too. We need our foreign aid to prevent outbreaks of infectious diseases from spreading before reaching our shores. But U.S.-funded early detection and treatment for deadly diseases like Ebola have sputtered to a standstill. Even where very few waivers have been issued for some life-saving assistance, reports from implementers indicate that few, if any, programs have actually resumed due to payment systems not functioning and USAID staff layoffs. It is also counterproductive to eviscerate programs focused on other transnational concerns, ranging from conflict and corruption to migration and the trafficking of people and drugs. This unserious review process is additionally causing our government to be tied up in court cases that may drag on for years and prove costly in connection to broken contracts and potential violations of law. These losses are unnecessary, even if, or perhaps especially if, you believe, like I do, in the need for reforms. It is critically important to be able to differentiate between waste and congressionally appropriated projects that may reflect different policy priorities. Waste is the food rotting in ports. It's the purchased medicines that cannot be distributed. It is the cutting of programs and firing of people that then in turn prevents this administration from being able to meet its own foreign policy goals. Going forward, government will need an oversight approach to programming that includes the following. 1, a congressional notification and review process so committees can pause or halt projects. 2, implementing partners should undergo audits and submit detailed plans and quarterly expenditure reports. 3, in highly insecure contexts, there should be a vetting of key program staff against classified counterterror databases before U.S. dollars are spent. And 4, an inspector general should be empowered to conduct investigations and other activities to help identify, prevent, and punish any proven misuse of taxpayer funding. The issue before you today is that these elements are precisely the safeguards that have already been in place at USAID. But the staffing to carry it out has just been gutted. By destroying this system of oversight, the administration has done more damage to effective programming than any specific project failures critics of foreign aid may choose to highlight. We should all care about foreign aid. We should care enough to make it better, not kill it. Congress has a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you, witnesses, for your testimony. Again, Mr. Unger, I apologize. We can also confirm the World Program posted that the recent pause concerning in-kind food assistance to WFP has been rescinded. This allows for resumption of food purchases and deliveries
Madam Chair?
visiting USAID.
Madam Chair, are we going member to member, or do you get to make a speech in between each witness? If you're going to offer evidence or
you're
testimony,
you're not
you should
recognized.
be in the clock.
You're not recognized. It's
Sure I
my
am.
time.
Sure I am.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. And this committee, based on this hearing and witness testimonies, will consider recommending investigations and criminal referrals. When Joe Biden was president, his son Hunter was on the board of a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma. The prosecutor general of Ukraine at the time, Viktor Shokin, was investigating Burisma for corruption. Biden threatened, and is on video, to withhold $1 billion of USAID grant to Ukraine if Shokin wasn't fired. Mr. Primorak, is USAID supposed to be used as leverage by a president to protect his son?
No, we call that corruption.
Mr. Primorak, in your estimation, roughly what percentage of USAID funding is doled out to bad actors or to efforts that don't have the best interests of Americans in mind?
I think what troubles me most is learning, I believe last year, following the hard work of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Senator Joni Ernst, that USAID has been paying out over 50% to overhead charges. The Office of Inspector General of USAID criticized the agency for not knowing the overhead charges being handed out to all of these actors for $142 billion of disbursements. That is extremely troubling.
Yes. Mr. Primorak, Samantha Power, Biden's USAID administrator, openly spoke about her agency's efforts to promote democracy around the world. In your estimation, Mr. Primorak, is that what she was doing? If not, what was USAID doing during the Biden administration?
Let me cite the Holy Father, Pope Francis, who accused USAID and other donors of promoting ideological colonization, pushing a radical ideology onto the developing world that is anti-family and anti-life.
It has been asserted that USAID spent tens of millions of American taxpayer dollars to promote propaganda in Brazil in the lead up to the Bolsonaro-Lula election in 2022. It has been claimed that this funding was used to pass censorship laws and silence Bolsonaro's online presence, and even bar him from running for office in the future. Mr. Primorak, can you offer any insight into these allegations, or at least comment on whether the U.S. should play a role in toppling democratic processes around the world?
I think what we saw was USAID weaponized by the Biden administration and by Samantha Power to attack any party that was conservative. It just didn't happen in Brazil. It also happened, for instance, in very pro-America, Poland and Hungary as well.
One of the most extensive examples of regime change operations fueled by USAID is that of their role in the Syrian civil war aimed at toppling Bashar al-Assad. Reports from DD Geopolitics and other sources estimate that USAID funneled over $15 billion into Syria over a decade, covertly funding opposition groups, mercenaries, and anti-government networks under the cover of humanitarian aid. This included support for militant factions and propaganda efforts, often in collaboration with the National Endowment for Democracy. The operation culminated in Assad's overthrow in 2024 by Western-backed groups, with USAID's financial trails documented in congressional budget reports and criticized by Syrian officials as interference masses assistance. Mr. Roman, do these kinds of activities carried out by an American agency make Americans safer at home, or do they risk embroiling us in more deadly and costly foreign conflicts?
When the agency is doing it according to the way in which represents American national security interests, it's correct. But when it's abused for political purposes, ideological umbrage, and sponsoring Islamism, which is inherently anti-American, it is the worst exhaustion of American taxpayer money that can be thought of, especially when it leads to the loss and danger to American lives.
In 2014, during the Euromaidan uprising in Ukraine, which led to the ousting of President Viktor Yanukovych, USAID is estimated to have spent billions of dollars on civil society initiatives that were allegedly designed to destabilize the pro-Russian government. USAID specifically funded NGOs and media outlets that amplified the anti-Yanukovych sentiment in an effort to align Ukraine more closely with the West. We also know that 9 out of 10 of Ukraine's major media outlets receive funding from USAID. Mr. Roman, should Americans' tax dollars be funding propaganda?
When it's pro-American propaganda, yes. But if it's supporting another regime which is inherently anti-American, no, it should have no involvement with that, which is the pattern we've seen under the Biden and Obama administrations.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and good morning. I appreciate that this committee is going to shed some light on what's going on at USAID, but I do really wish that our friend with his golden chainsaw would drop on by, because you know what, Mr. Musk, we really would like to know what you're up to. And so far, our friends across the aisle have shielded you from appearing in front of Congress. So come on down, bring your chainsaw. We'll be happy to host you. Let's dive into some of our questions with the witnesses here. Mr. Primorak, I appreciate your federal service. Thank you for serving as a Fed. I hope that you do not share some of the same sentiments we've heard here in Congress over the last several days, that our federal workers are somehow enemies of the state, but in fact are selfless, dedicated individuals who serve our federal government and dedicate their life to this work. And I understand that you were the author of the USAID chapter, Project 2025. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And I was intrigued to read it last night because there was a number of things that I agreed with, both in your testimony and in the chapter. In fact, some of the things that I agreed about are that U.S. foreign aid is a powerful tool, that it should align with national security interests, that we should not be empowering foreign adversaries. And I, too, am also deeply concerned about autocratic regimes like our adversaries in China, who are aggressively investing in soft power at the expense of the United States. And I also agree strongly with all the witnesses that we need reforms to our foreign aid, that we need more oversight, vetting, auditing, and inspection of what is going on. However, and I recognize that Mr. Primorak, you didn't really touch on this in your oral testimony here today. I was surprised that in Project 2025 and some of your other statements that one of the primary areas that you really have disagreed with the foreign aid that has happened under other administrations is in the areas specifically of climate change, LGBTQ rights issues, and promoting diversity and DEI. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And although you did not testify as much today here about these issues, I want to just make sure you do believe in climate change, correct?
Climate change, sure.
Yes.
Climate changes all the time. I'm a big reader of history.
Yes.
You can see throughout the millennia.
Absolutely. And you understand that right now our allies in the Pacific who are on the front lines in pushing back against Chinese authoritarianism are requesting climate assistance from the United States because they are facing some of the most extreme impacts of climate change, correct?
According to USAID
Just a
document,
yes or no, sir. You
there's been a
understand
drop
that
of
about our
99%
Pacific allies, right?
of people killed by climate change. 99% drop.
Sir, the
So it's
question
not
is,
radicalism,
do
it's good
you
infrastructure.
understand that our Pacific allies, who we have defense agreements and compacts with, are asking the United States for climate assistance as for the exchange to provide a place for the United States, for example, to push back against Chinese authoritarianism? You understand that, correct?
Yes, under Trump,
Yes.
we were
Okay,
helping
so
those
that is
islands.
why we are involved in providing financial assistance and foreign aid around climate change, in addition to the fact that it is a global threat. Now, I understand that you also, and I'm not even going to use the language here because I very much disagree with it, but I just want to ask, you agree that LGBTQ people exist and have human rights, right?
Absolutely, we were
Yeah.
doing that under Trump
Okay.
1.
And you also agree that our governments and our institutions should look like and reflect the people that they represent, especially overseas? It's part of being able to actually engage with foreign governments, correct?
If we want to do counter China, there's nothing more that has
I'm
alienated
asking
billions
you a
of
very
people than pushing
straightforward
an
question.
ideology that they resent.
Okay. Well, I see that you're not interested in engaging in the conversation. And while we can agree to disagree, I'll take this as a difference in values, maybe worldview. But I just want to point out here that this perfectly aligns with what the Trump administration is doing in trying to gut programs around diversity, equity, inclusion, supporting LGBTQ rights and human rights overseas, and climate change, and helping our allies overseas. And this is not waste, fraud, and abuse. This is a different worldview. You can't just call something waste, fraud, and abuse because you disagree with it. Now, Mr. O'Neill, it's nice to see you here again. Oh, I am out of time, and I will circle back. Thank you.
I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cloud, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and I appreciate you holding this hearing. I appreciate you witnesses for being here. It's been astonishing to watch. We already knew that there was a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government, but to watch over the last few weeks as the extent and egregiousness of it has been revealed. I've said a number of times how aggravating it is that this government is forcing the American people to pay for the demise of their own country. We've seen this a number of times, especially in how foreign aid is treated. And much of this funding we're realizing now, as Mr. O'Neill has pointed out, we're uncovering is the world's largest money laundering scheme in history. And so I would like to think that if these kind of things were put to a vote, that our friends on the left wouldn't vote to support a pickle maker in the Ukraine, or to have transgender operas in other countries, or to send people to Paris Fashion Week and the like. I would like to think if that was a vote, that would also get a no vote on the other side of the aisle, that this is stuff that is not necessarily, the taxpayer dollars shouldn't be funding. but you got to wonder about the vitriol you see when these things come uncovered to protect these things. Now, definitely the border trafficking institution that was set up, the complete industry, the censorship apparatus, those are examples where we really saw that these taxpayer dollar funds were going to these NGOs that were purely leftist organizations that were turning out voters and getting all this, basically being a campaign front at taxpayer expense. And so you got to wonder how this is happening, because this is not in the legislation. There's no line item in a legislation that has these sort of things in it. So, Mr. Primack, I'd like to ask you, where are these decisions being made? Who's making the decisions about where these dollars go?
This is a combination of cooperation between the Congress and the White House. I can tell you that during my tenure at USAID, everything that we did had strong bipartisan support. Unfortunately, when President Biden came in,
but it's someone in an agency somewhere, is that right? Making the decision at a how's that decision made? Who's making that decision? Like, that is before the check goes out, who's pushing the button that says send this check?
It starts with the administrator, goes down to the bureau level and the office level. But in the end, contract officers have to make sure at the Office of Acquisition Procurement that these are following U.S. laws and the policies of the president.
Contract officers. Now, are these people elected? We hear a lot about elected officials making these, certain decisions.
There's no one at USAID that is elected.
So, yeah, so the people sending money are not elected officials. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. One of the issues we've had is trying to track this dollars once it goes out to bring accountability to it. And there is no connection that we've been able to find to an employee ID number, for example, connected to where the grant money is going out or the contract money is going out. We're working on legislation to fix that. But one of the things that's really disturbing is the fact that some of the money that's going out doesn't even have a name of where it's going out. You talked about that, Mr. Roman. Could you speak to that for a second? It's to the tune of billions of dollars.
Correct. Miscellaneous foreign awardees. The issue with it is that while the individual grantees have to apply for a vetting process that USAID conducts in terms of a government review, including with counterterrorism databases, there's a self-certification process by their sub-grantees. It's as if though you hire a contractor in your house to redo your living room, and he hires a bunch of robbers to take everything out, and you're left with the spades on the wall rather than having a fully renovated room itself.
And so some of these dollars have been going to support terrorist organizations.
Right. And
taxpayer dollars going to support. Now, what would happen if we found a business that was funneling money to the Taliban?
They would be indicted. They would be charged, go before trial, and go to jail for a 20-year sentence for money laundering or for material support for terrorism.
So this is one of those cases where it's only legal if the government's doing it?
Right. In the opening chairman's remarks, she was saying that this is about fraud, waste, and abuse, and if it was anyone else, it's as if though a private citizen can't do this, but if a U.S. government agency or bureaucrat wants to give money to a terror organization, it's okay.
Yeah, I find that atrocious. I think the American people do too. Mr. Primack, I want to touch on one thing because I've talked to ambassadors across the world, and you hear this. We'd like to align ourselves with the United States. We don't want to align ourselves with China, but when we're talking to China, they're talking roads, bridges, infrastructure, those kind of things. Things we traditionally know as soft power. But right now, when they're talking to the United States, what they've gotten from our State Department over the last few years is social reengineering. Many of them have come to say, our nation espouses Judeo-Christian values. They don't. And even as I talk to pastors across our country who are working to send millions into missionaries, their eyes in Christian universities to understand the fact that our State Department is actually sending billions to counteract those ideals. Could you speak to that?
You can quickly answer, and we have to move on.
I've spoken to many foreign African officials, for example. When they're meeting with Mr. Blinken, they were ready to talk counter-genocide. Instead, they got to social reengineering.
I now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank the witnesses for helping the committee with its work. I've been here a while, so I was here actually when President George W. Bush was confronted with wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And in the midst of that, members of this committee, I was in the lead because I was chair of the National Security Subcommittee. We went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and we vetted some of the billions of dollars that the president spent over there. Some of it was wisely spent in the best interest of protecting our sons and daughters in uniform. Others purely wasted that I think fell into the hands of our enemies. I think that has been true of every administration that has tried as they might to strengthen America's national security by investments abroad. I do want to say that what troubles me greatly is that now we have a cessation of all foreign aid, and just take Ukraine for example. I know it's been $174 billion in aid from the U.S. to Ukraine. It's important to note that that $174 billion, most of it was spent here in the United States, and paying defense workers and defense contractors and putting Americans to work. 90% of that on the defense side. And then when you look at the grain shipments that we have made, not only to Ukraine but to others, because obviously their agricultural systems are inoperable right now, those are American farmers. And Madam Chair, I would like to ask for unanimous consent just to submit this article from the Associated Press entitled "The USAID Shutdown is Upending the Livelihoods of Farmers and Other Americans."
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, and what also troubles me is that now we have a president saying that Ukraine started the war. And Mr. Ullman, you're a really smart guy. You're up on this stuff. You pay attention. Do you seriously believe that Zelensky invaded Russia? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. I'm just happy to hear you say that. I expected that, but look, members on this committee, some are new, so some weren't there, but we all sat in classified briefings for months where our defense and intelligence personnel would brief us and say, okay, this week Vladimir Putin is moving his armored divisions from Vladivostok in eastern Russia 4,000 miles and positioning them in front of the Ukraine border, anticipating an invasion. And then, afterwards, after the invasion, actually 2020, I think it was, Putin took credit, said, I ordered the special operation against Ukraine. And yet, we have a president saying the opposite. He's saying that Ukraine invaded Russia. They started the war. And it's just, to restate Mr. Primarak's question, was there one Republican in the room that raised their hand and said, no, Mr. President, that is a lie. That is false. I didn't hear anything. Not one of my colleagues corrected the president and stood up to him and said, no, Mr. President. No, Mr. President. It was Russia. It was Russia that started that war. They invaded Ukraine. And it's right for the U.S. to stand with Ukraine and their people. I didn't hear any of that. That's what troubles me. I had instances where I agreed with George W. Bush on some things. And I had plenty that I disagreed with. But, that's Congress's role here. That's our job, to call out the truth to power. And so this idea that all foreign aid should be suspended is an attack on common sense. It's an attack on American national security for this country, and we should be more careful. I agree. Let's look at the areas where we're spending foreign aid in an area and in a way that is good for U.S. national security, and let's get rid of the stuff. Some of it you've already pointed out that it is not in our central interest. That's a good process that I would like to engage in. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
I now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleagues across the aisle are quick to judge the actions of this president in the early days of his administration. But I didn't hear any loud voices from across the aisle when President Biden, who was clearly experiencing severe cognitive decline, ran this country. I don't even know who was running the country. I don't know who was making the decisions. I don't know how those decisions were being formed and who was signing the executive orders he was engaging in. So it's just very rich that I'm hearing all of these concerns about President Trump's efforts to negotiate peace in Ukraine and the manner in which he's going about it. And I hate it, but I think I have to set the record straight, because President Trump and his team went to Munich to the security conference just weeks ago, and they were engaged in diplomacy. They were trying to create an opportunity for the United States to have a financial and economic interest in the future of Ukraine. And that was through a minerals deal. The U.S. has a strategic interest in having a long-term supply chain for rare earth minerals. And so President Trump said, we can get on board with this. Let's do this. It might not be the NATO membership that they want, but it's a close second. And so your concern is related to those conversations, because Zelensky originally said, yes, let's do it. That sounds like a good deal. And then within 24 hours, he backtracked. He did a 180. And he actually started disparaging President Trump. And he was disparaging the administration. So, President Trump said some things and tried to create pressure to then bring Zelensky back to the table. Whoa, guess what? Guess who's on the way to Washington to sign the minerals deal? So I get it that my colleagues across the aisle want to throw stones at everything that President Trump does. My favorite was when President Trump was engaging with Canada and Mexico, and the Democrats didn't even have time to throw stones at his attempt to bring them to the table, secure their side of the border, because it only took them 4 or 5 hours to come to the table. The articles hadn't even gone to print yet. So, look, President Trump is going to negotiate peace in Ukraine. He's going to bring all of our hostages home in Gaza, and he has deserved the leeway. Now to the issue at hand, USAID. 77 million people voted for President Trump because we are out of balance. The Biden administration, whoever was running the show, engaged in ridiculous policies that the American people disagree with, whether it's with DEI or trans policies, whatever it is. We're turning the page, and we're not going to abdicate our leadership in the global community. We're going to hit reset, because we are so out of balance that all we can do is go to zero and then build back. Because we're not going to spend $2 million on sex changes in Guatemala or $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. These are ridiculous policies that the American people have overwhelmingly said they do not want. So, Mr. Roman, to the issue at hand, how do we make sure when we get our foreign aid back running that we don't give money to terrorists? That's a great question.
So there's 4 recommendations that I would offer. The first is no more miscellaneous listings, as we had heard from the gentleman before. We have to use public vetting processes that require complete transparency, encourage independent audits, and mandate strict screening.
Why did we not have transparency before?
I have, for the last 18 months, been trying to get information about a grant made to what we believe is a Hamas affiliate, and the Freedom of Information Act Department, or the Freedom of Information Officer at USAID, has stonewalled me for the last year and a half. And this goes back all the way to 2015. It's as if
bureaucrats think they know better.
Bureaucrats think they know better.
Guess what? We're going to create transparency across all of government. And that is what President Trump is doing through Elon Musk. Elon Musk has been asked by the president to serve. And he is going to bring transparency, not just to USAID, to every single nook and cranny of the government, because that is what the American people want. And it's 2025. We have the ability to do that. Mr. Roman, continue. What else can we do to make sure?
I'll go quick. I know we're limited. Stronger accountability mechanisms, clawback provisions, stiff penalties for misuse, criminal investigations if you go towards the terrorism financing. The State Department, under Secretary Rubio's review, must have a roadmap for better oversight. And lastly, the legislature must give teeth to its funding bills. We have to be able to have robust penalties, transparency mandates, and real-time oversight tools, rather than waiting 3 years to get reports from contractors when they've already committed the violation past the statute of limitations.
I'm out of time. We all know sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that's the path forward. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. A member of the public audience made an obscene gesture. It was caught on camera to a member of Congress. I would like to remind everyone in the hearing room to follow the rules of decorum. Capitol Police will now remove the offender, and I expect members of the audience to maintain decorum. We'll take a pause for a brief moment.
Point of order or a point of clarification, Madam Chair. Okay. Well, never mind.
Do you have a parliamentary inquiry?
No.
Okay.
I'm okay now.
Okay. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you to our ranking member, our chairwoman, and I want to thank our witnesses for also for being here today. Thank you all for joining us. So this is obviously our second hearing on DOGE, and certainly as Elon Musk and Donald Trump work together to destroy our federal agencies. Now, a lot has happened in just the last few weeks since DOGE has been off rating the federal agencies that we care so much about. We know that FAA staff have been fired, making our airspace less safe. Veterans Affairs staff have been fired, risking services for our vets. Food safety and health staff have been fired as we face a bird flu pandemic. And all of our agencies have been thrown into chaos by Elon Musk's emails demanding, of course, that federal workers respond to what they're doing in the last week, which he's now had to, of course, retract. Now, we're here today to discuss Elon's attack on foreign aid, which has been severe. And I want to also bring, again, this is a pic of co-president Elon Musk, who, of course, is leading DOGE. And I brought this pic, of course, to our last hearing. And I know some folks were upset by it. But just to be clear, we know that Elon Musk is dangerous, he's incompetent, he's chaotic.
Sell like crazy. I happen to think it's going to sell like crazy. It's a bargain. But we'll know fairly soon. I think Howard and Scott, a few of you really are responsible for it. But Howard, if you want to discuss that for a couple of minutes, I think I'd like to have you. I think it's going to be a very successful program. This is commerce.
So the EB-5 program, which has been around for many years, had investment of $1 million into projects in America. And those projects were often suspect, they didn't really work out, there wasn't any oversight of it. And so for $1 million investment, you got a visa and then you came into the country and ended up with a green card. So it was poorly overseen, poorly executed. Then you had our border open where millions of people came through. So the idea is we will have a proper business. We will modify the EB-5 agreement. Christy and I are working on it together. For $5 million, they'll get a license from the Department of Commerce. Then they'll make a proper investment on the EB-5, right? And we think Scott and I will design the EB-5 investment model because Scott and I are the best people together to do that. So this is joint. This is exactly the Trump administration. We all work together. We work it out to be the best. And if we sell, just remember, 200,000. There's a line for EB-5 of 250,000 right now. 200,000 of these gold green cards is $1 trillion to pay down our debt. And that's why the president is doing it, because we are going to balance this budget and we are going to pay off the debt under President Trump.
And to qualify, do you have to promise and make commitments to create a certain number of jobs here in the U.S.?
No, because not all these people are going to be job builders. There'll be successful people, or there'll be people that were hired from colleges, like sort of like paying an athlete a bonus. I mean, Apple or one of the companies will go out and they'll spend they'll buy 5 of them and they're going to get 5 people. Look, I've had the complaint from a lot of companies where they go out to hire people and they can't hire them out of colleges. And you know what they do? They go back to India, or they go back to the country where they came, and they open up a company, and they become billionaires. And they're employing thousands and thousands. There are a lot of examples. There are some really big examples where they were forced out of the country, they graduated top in their class at a great school, and they weren't able to stay. This is all the time you hear it. And the biggest complaint I get from companies, other than over-regulation, which we took care of, but we're going to have to take care of it here because a lot of that was put back on by Biden. But the biggest complaint is the fact that they can't have any longevity with people. This way they have pretty much unlimited longevity. Also with the 5 million, you know, that's a path to citizenship. So that's going to be, it's sort of a green card plus, and it's a path to citizenship. We're going to call it the gold card. And I think it's going to be very treasured. I think it's going to do very well. And we're going to start selling, hopefully, in about 2 weeks. Now, just so you understand, if we sell 1 million, right, 1 million, that's $5 trillion. 5 trillion. Howard was using a different number, but that's $5 trillion. If we sell 10 million, which is possible, 10 million highly productive people coming in, or people that we're going to make productive, they'll be young, but they're talented, like a talented athlete. That's $50 trillion. That means our debt is totally paid off, and we have $15 trillion above that. And now, I don't know that we're going to sell that many. Maybe we won't sell many at all, but I think we're going to sell a lot because I think there really is a thirst. No other country can do this because people don't want to go to other countries. They want to come here. Everybody wants to come here, especially since November 5th.
Mr. President, how can you
All these people will be vetted, okay?
Mr.
They'll be
President,
vetted.
on Ukraine, can you talk a little bit about what type of security guarantees you're willing to make?
Well, I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, you know, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor. But we're going to make sure everything goes well. And as you know, we'll be making we'll be really partnering with Ukraine in terms of rare earth. We very much need rare earth. They have great rare earth. We'll be working with Secretary Burgum and with Chris. You'll be working on that together. And we're going to be able to have tremendous, I mean, this gives us, because we don't have that much of it here. We have some, but we don't have that much, and we need a lot more to really propel us to the next level to lead in every way. We're leading right now with AI. We're leading with everything right now, but we need resources. We have to double our electric capacity. We have to do many things. We have to really triple, if you think of it, the electric capacity from what we have right now, if you can believe it. So I just say this, the deal we're making gets us, it brings us great wealth. We get back the money that we spent, and we hope that we're going to be able to settle this up. We want to settle it. We want to stop. I tell you what, I'm doing it for 2 reasons, but the number 1 reason by far is to watch all these people being killed. I see pictures every week from, I assume satellite pictures mostly, but there's some pictures on site of thousands of soldiers that are being killed. They're being decimated because equipment today, military equipment, is so powerful and so devastating. And number 1, I want to see people stop. And they're not from here. They're from primarily 2 other countries. And then, by the way, let's talk about the Middle East. We got to solve that problem too. And that's come a long way. We're doing very well in that also. A lot of things are happening on that. But I'm watching soldiers being killed, Ukrainian and Russian soldiers being killed. My number 1 thing is to get that stopped. My number 2 thing is I don't want to have to pay any more money because Biden has spent $350 billion without any chance of getting it back. Now we're going to be getting all of that money back plus a lot more. And we provided a great thing. I mean, we provided something very important. And we'll be working with Ukraine, and because we'll be taking that, we're going to be taking what we're entitled to take. Now, they spent $350 billion, and Europe spent $100 billion. Now, does anybody really think that's fair? But then we find out a little while ago, not so long ago, a few months ago, I found out that the money they spent, they get back. But the money we spent, we don't get back. I said, well, we're going to get it back. And we'll be able to make a deal. And again, President Zelensky's coming to sign the deal. And it's a great thing. It's a great deal for Ukraine, too, because they get us over there, and we're going to be working over there. We'll be on the land. And, you know, in that way, there's sort of automatic security, because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there. And so we'll be there in that way. But Europe will be watching it very closely. I know that UK has said and France has said that they volunteered to put so-called peacekeepers on the site, and I think that's a good thing.
Mr. President, you mentioned the high cost of eggs, and we've seen consumer confidence this week have a sharp drop from last month, the biggest dip in, I believe, 3 years. Why is that, your assessment? Why is that the case, and is there anything you can do?
Well, I think that consumer confidence, if you look at confidence in the nation, it had the biggest increase in the history of the chart. It went up 42 points in a period of like days after the election, since the election. So since the election, the confidence in our nation, including right track, wrong track, the first time it's ever happened where we were on the right track, because this country has been on the wrong track for a long time. So the confidence in business, confidence in the country has reached an all-time high. We have never reached levels like we are right now. Okay.
You've said, Mr. President, you've been very clear in saying that as long as you're president, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon.
That's true.
Is it also your policy that as long as you're president, China will never take Taiwan by force?
I never comment on that. I don't comment on anything because I don't want to ever put myself in that position. And if I said it, I certainly wouldn't be saying it to you. I'd be saying it to other people, maybe people around this table, and very specific people around this table. So I don't want to put myself in that position. But I can tell you what, I have a great relationship with President Xi. I've had a great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. I see so many things saying that we don't want China in this country. That's not right. We want them to invest in the United States. That's good. That's a lot of money coming in, and we'll invest in China. We'll do things with China. The relationship we'll have with China will be a very good one. I see all of these phony reports that we don't want them money, we don't want anything to do with them. That's wrong. We're going to have a good relationship with China, but they won't be able to take advantage of us. What they did to Biden was, he didn't know what was happening. He didn't know what he was doing. The administration didn't know what they were doing. It was very sad to watch. But we're going to have a good relationship with China and Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We're doing things that, look, when I left, we had no wars. We had defeated ISIS totally. We had no inflation. We didn't have the Afghanistan withdrawal, the worst withdrawal anybody's ever seen. I think that's one of the reasons that President Putin looked at that. He said, wow, these guys are a paper tiger. Look at it, we're no paper tiger. Don't forget, we got rid of ISIS in 3 weeks. People said it would take 5 years. We did it because when I came in, I let them do what they had to do. And the man that headed that operation is now going to be your chairman, right? Chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Yes, sir.
And Raisin Kane. I liked him right from the beginning. As soon as I heard his name, I said, that's my guy. Okay. Any other questions?
Decreases in crossings at the border for you to continue the pause on tariffs against Mexico and Canada? And
No,
if
no,
not,
I'm not stopping the tariffs. No. Millions of people have died because of the fentanyl that comes over the border.
even with the 90% drop in border crossings, though, this last month compared to about a year ago?
Yeah, they've been good, but that's also due to us, mostly due to us. I mean,
Mr.
it's very hard.
President,
It's right now very hard to come through the border. But look, the damage has been done. We've lost millions of people due to fentanyl. It comes mostly from China, but it comes through Mexico and it comes through Canada. And I have to tell you that, on April 2nd, I was going to do it on April 1st, but I'm a little bit superstitious, so I made it April 2nd. The tariffs go on, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think you're going to see something that's going to be amazing. We've been taken advantage of as a country for a long period of time. We've been tariffed, but we didn't tariff. Now, I did, when I was here, we took in $700 billion from China. $700 billion. Not one president in the history of our country took in 10 cents from China. At the same time, China respected us. Now, when COVID came in, that was a different deal. I used to call it the China virus. I guess I can call it the China virus again, but it's an accurate term, but I won't do that out of respect to China.
immigration enforcement.
Say it again.
On Gaza, I just wondered if there's any progress towards a second phase of the ceasefire.
Well, I'm very disappointed when I see four bodies came in today. These are young people. Young people don't die, okay? Young people don't die. These are young people. 4 bodies came in today. They think they're doing us a favor by sending us bodies. So, look, that's a decision that has to be made by Israel by Bibi, but Israel has to make that decision. We got a lot of hostages back, but it's very sad what happened to those people. I mean, you had a young lady with her hand practically blown off. You know why it blew up? Because she put up her hand to try and stop a bullet that was coming her way. And it hit her hand and blew off her fingers, big part of her hand. This is a vicious group of people. And Israel's going to have to decide what they're doing. Phase 1 is going to be ending. Think of it, today they sent in 4 bodies. And I will say one thing, though. I've spoken to a lot of the parents and a lot of the people involved. They want those bodies almost as much and maybe even just as much as they wanted their son or their daughter. Amazing. Please, sir, please. My son is dead, but they have his body. Please, can you get it for us? It's the biggest thing. It's incredible, the level. They want the bodies of these people. They're dead. They're dead. And, you know, when I saw the ones that came in 2 weeks ago, they looked like they just got out of a concentration camp. Then the following week, a group came in and they weren't as bad and as bad a shape. But Israel's going to have to make a decision. You're right, phase 1 and now phase 2 has started. And today we got some, you know, very sad. We knew they were dead, by the way. We knew that they were going to be bodies as opposed to people that were living. But a very sad situation. At some point, somebody's going to say, hey, we got to do something about this.
Mr. President, you were just talking about Afghanistan and the bots withdrawal. Have all the generals or command staff that were involved with the withdrawal been fired or relieved of duty?
Well, that's a great idea. I'm not going to tell this man what to do, but I will say that. If I had his place, I'd fire every single one of them, Pete. That's a very good question.
Well, it's a question we've thought a lot about. We're doing a complete review of every single aspect of what happened with the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan and plan to have full accountability. It's one of the first things we announced at the Defense Department for that reason, sir. Certainly, General Raising Kane, who's on his way in, was not a part of that. Instead, was a part of leading the effort against ISIS by untying the hands of warfighters and finishing the job properly and then bringing our troops home. So we're taking a very different view, obviously, than the previous administration, and there will be full accountability.
I don't see big promotions in that group, and I think they're going to be largely gone. I know the man on my left. I think they're going to be largely gone. That was a horrible display, and you know I've dealt with the parents and the family of the 13 that were killed, but you know nobody ever talks about the 40 that were so badly hurt with the arms and the legs and the face and the whole thing, the missing arms and legs. It was so terrible the way that was handled, and it should have been gone through Bagram. We have a big base with big fences and nobody can get in, and you have, you know, hundreds of acres instead of a little local airport where the whole place went crazy. That was so badly handled, and I would think that most of those people are going to be gone.
Are we going to take Bagram back?
So I'll tell you what has bothered me very much, very, very much. We give billions of dollars to Afghanistan. Nobody knows that. Nobody knew that. Do you know we give billions of dollars to Afghanistan? And yet we left behind all of that equipment, which wouldn't have happened. You know, we were getting out under me. I'm the one that got it down to 5,000 people. We were going to get out, but we were going to keep Bagram, not because of Afghanistan, but because of China, because it's exactly 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear missiles. So they were going to keep Bagram. We were going to keep a small force on Bagram. We were going to have Bagram Air Base, one of the biggest air bases in the world, one of the biggest runways, one of the most powerful runways in the sense that it was very heavy concrete and steel. You could carry about anything. You could land anything on those runways. We gave it up. And you know who's occupying it right now? China. China. Biden gave it up. So we're going to keep that, and we're going to have a withdrawal, and we're going to take our equipment. We're going to do it properly. We're going to do it we're going to keep the equipment. Well, they ran out. It was, what happened there was, in fact, you know, in all fairness to Putin, when he saw that, he said, well, this is our time to go into Ukraine, I guess, because it was, the timing seemed to be about right. But we send them billions of dollars in aid, which nobody knows. If the American public knew that, they know it now. And if we're doing that, I think they should give our equipment back. And I told Pete to study that. But we left billions, tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment behind. Brand new trucks. You see them display it every year, or their little roadway someplace where they have a road and they drive the, waving the flag and talking about America. Beautiful equipment that's all, the top of the line stuff, brand new stuff. Now it's getting older, but you know what? We're going to pay them. I think we should get a lot of that equipment back. You know that Afghanistan is one of the biggest sellers of military equipment in the world. You know why? They're selling the equipment that we left. We're first. They were second or third. Can you believe it? They're selling 777,000 rifles, 70,000 armor-plated. Many of them were armor-plated trucks and vehicles. 70,000. If you think of a used car lot, the biggest one in the country, if I would say, JD, if somebody had 500 cars, that would be a lot. This is 70,000 vehicles we had there, and we left it for them. I think we should get it back.
Mr. President, the spending bill that passed last night aims to cut $2 trillion.
Right.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud. I'm sure you're okay with that, like people that shouldn't be on, people that are illegal aliens and others, criminals in many cases. And that's with Social Security. We have a lot of people. You see that immediately when you see people that are 200 years old that are being sent checks for Social Security. Some of them are actually being sent checks. So we're tracing that down, and I have a feeling that Pam is going to do a very good job with that. But you have a lot of fraud. But no, I'm not. We're not doing anything on that.
Mr. President, part of your mission, sir, part of your mission has been, thank you, I'm sorry. Part of your mission has been to restore executive control over the executive branch. Is it your view of your authority that you have the power to call up any one of or all of the people seated at this table and issue orders that they're bound to follow?
Oh, yeah, they'll follow the orders, yes, they will.
No exceptions?
No exception. Well, let's see, let me think. Oh, yeah. She'll have an exception. Of course, no exceptions. You know that.
Mr. President, can you clarify the Canada-Mexico tariffs? You had put that 30-day pause, but you just referred to April.
25%.
25%. When does it go into effect?
April 2nd.
April 2nd for Canada-Mexico.
Correct.
And
for everything.
Well, we have the fentanyl-related is a pause. If they can prove to the president they've done an excellent job, that's what they first do in 30 days.
Have you guys seen any
But then the overall is April 2nd. So the big transaction is April 2nd, but the fentanyl-related things, they're working hard on the border. At the end of that 30 days, they have to prove to the president that they've satisfied him to that regard. If they have,
It's gonna be
then
hard
he'll give
to
them a pause, or he won't. But
It's going
that's
to be
up
hard
to
to
him. We'll see.
satisfy. We lose 300,000 people a year to fentanyl. Not 100, not 95, not 60 like you read. You know, you've been reading it for years. We lost, in my opinion, over the last couple of years, on average, maybe close to 300,000 people dead. And the families are ruined. You know, when they lose a daughter, when they lose a son, the families are never the same. You're never going to be the same. So you're talking about 1 million people. But when the daughters die, I see it, daughters die and the sons die because of fentanyl. And in some cases, I don't even know they're taking it. They're buying something else and it's laced with fentanyl and they end up dying. And I've known many people who've lost children to fentanyl and for other reasons, but to fentanyl, it's such a big killer. And those people are never the same people. I mean, I've seen people that for the rest of their lives, they're not the same people. They're so different, it's not even believable. Dynamic people, happy people they die a miserable death. And that's because of the crap that comes in through China and through Mexico and through Canada. A lot of it comes through Canada. Look, we support Canada. $200 billion a year in subsidies one way or the other. We let them make millions of cars. We let them send us lumber. We don't need their lumber. We're going to free up our lumber. Lee's going to do that, head of environmental. We're going to free up our lumber. We have the best lumber there is. We don't need their lumber. What do we need their lumber for? When you look at we subsidize them $200 billion a year. Without us, Canada can't make it. You know, Canada relies on us 95%. We rely on them 4%. Big difference. And I say Canada should be our 51st state. There's no tariffs, no nothing. And I say that we give them military protection. They have a very small military. They spend very little money on military. On NATO, they're just about last in terms of payment because they say, why should we spend on military? That's a tremendous cost. Most nations can't afford to even think about it. Why should we spend on military? The United States protects us. And I would say that's largely true. We protect Canada, but it's not fair. It's not fair that they're not paying their way. And if they had to pay their way, they couldn't exist. When I spoke to, let's call it the Prime Minister rather than the governor, but when I spoke to him, I said, why are we giving you $200 billion a year? He was unable to answer the question. I said, why are we letting you make millions of cars and send them in? He was unable to answer the question. Justin Trudeau, nice guy. I think he's a very good guy. I call him Governor Trudeau. He should be governor because the fact is that if we don't give them cars, we don't have to give them cars. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell cars into the United States. The tariffs will make it impossible for them to sell lumber or anything else into the United States. And all I'm asking to do is break even or lose a little bit, but not lose $200 billion. And we love Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. And but honestly, it's not fair for us to be supporting Canada. And if we don't support them, they don't subsist as a nation. Okay?
Mr. President, on the EU tariffs, Mr. President, have you just made a decision on what level you will seek on tariffs in the European Union?
We have made a decision. We'll be announcing it very soon, and it'll be 25%, generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada, different kind of case. They've really taken advantage of us in a different way. They don't accept our cars. They don't accept essentially our farm products. They use all sorts of reasons why not. And we accept everything of them. And we have about a $300 billion deficit with the European Union. Now, I love the countries of Europe. I guess I'm from there at some point a long time ago, right? But indirectly, pretty directly too, I guess. But I love the countries of Europe. I love all countries, frankly, all different. But European Union's been, it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
What will happen if these countries or the EU retaliate?
They can't. I mean, they can try, but they can't.
China did. They
are
imposed
pledging
tariffs
to, sir.
That went into effect. China's retaliatory tariffs on the 10th of February. Has there been any impact that you've been able to observe?
That's right. No, they can do it, and they can try, but the numbers can never equal what ours, because we can go off. We are the pot of gold. We're the one that everybody wants, and they can retaliate, but it cannot be a successful retaliation because we just go cold turkey. We don't buy anymore, and if that happens, we win.
Are you talking to Eric Prince about privatizing deportations?
No, I haven't.
Mr. President, you're in litigation with CBS News. Is this a case that you'd like to see go to trial, or are you open to
With
some
who?
CBS, that 60 Minutes?
CBS?
Yes.
Well, CBS did something that was amazing. Kamala was unable to answer a question properly, and they took the question that they asked and they inserted an answer. They gave her an answer. This was 2 days before the election, right before the Sunday night before the election. And they wrote out they put her words from another question that was asked about a half an hour later, and they put that into the question. Nobody's ever even heard of it before. Nobody's ever heard of anything like this before, but they then did it, they say, on numerous occasions. And the FCC is looking at it very strongly, and everybody's looking at it, but nobody's ever seen anything. Think of it, they took her answers and they changed them. And I don't mean they changed a word or two, or they cut off a half a sentence, or they cut off a couple of words. I mean, I've had that happen too, but that you just say, then they say, well, we want brevity. We wanted to do it for time. They took out her answer and they inserted an entirely different answer that made her sound competent. And they did this, and nobody's ever, I thought I've heard of everything when it comes to that stuff. No, I've never heard of it. Nobody's ever seen. So we sued, and we are in discussions of settlement.
What would a number be, like 100? What's a number that you would think would be appropriate?
I think it's a lot. It probably did affect the election. I mean, we won by a lot. As I said, too big to rig. But it probably did affect the election. You know, probably could have won by more. But I could have lost the election because of that. We have to get to honest elections. We have to go back to paper ballots. We have to go back to voter ID. One-day election, ideally, or a short term, not these 48-day and 61-day elections where boxes are put in a room and, oh, let's move the boxes because we're putting in a new air conditioning system. Then you see the boxes move, and then you say, well, where are all the boxes? You know, what happened to the boxes that never came back? Now, our elections are extremely dishonest. We're the only country in the world that has mail-in voting and all of these different things that we put in. No other country in the world has it. You know, France went to, they had some of the things that we had, and they went to same-day voting, all paper. And you know, paper is very sophisticated now. It's a very sophisticated form of voting right now. It's a very safe form of voting. You know, the other things for the governors, I wish the governors would do it because the paper ballots will cost 9% of the machines, and they're 100%. You know, nothing's foolproof, but they're as close as you get. So we'll see what happens. But on the 60-minute thing, nobody's ever seen anything like it.
And would you link the FCC action to the litigation? I mean, does it make sense?
I don't think it's linked, but probably the lawyers look at it, you know, because I know it's going along. FCC is headed by a very competent person, and you have some very competent people on the board, and so I think they're looking at it very seriously.
Sir, of all the deals that you've done in your life, all the people you've sat across from and negotiated with, is President Putin distinct in any way?
He's a very smart guy. He's a very cunning person, but I've dealt with some people I've dealt with some really bad people. But I will tell you, as far as this is concerned, you have to understand, he had no intention, in my opinion, of settling this war. I think he wanted the whole thing. When I got elected, we spoke, and I think we're going to have a deal. I can't guarantee that. You know, a deal is a deal. Lots of crazy things happen in deals, right? But I think we're going to have a deal. If I didn't get elected, I believe he would have just continued to go through Ukraine, and over a period of time, a lot of people would have been killed. Would have lasted for a period of time. And the reason that Ukraine, and I have great respect for the Ukraine as fighters. They have great fighters, but without our equipment, that war would have been over, like people said, in a very short period of time. And if you remember, I gave the javelins, and the javelins are the things that knocked out those tanks right at the beginning of the war. They said that Obama at the time gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. Well, I was the one that did that, but I want to see it come to an end.
Will he have to make concessions, President Putin?
Yeah, he will. He's going to have to. And I believe that because we got elected, that war will come to an end. And I also believe if we didn't get elected, if this administration didn't win the election by a lot, that war would go on for a long time, and he would want to take the whole thing. The big question I had is, does he want to take the whole thing? But the reason, and the Ukrainians are good fighters, I have to say, but without the equipment, without our equipment, we have the best equipment in the world. We have the best military equipment in the world. Without our equipment, that would have been over very quickly.
What concessions would you like to see? What concessions would you like to see?
Oh, I don't want to tell it right now, but I can tell you that NATO you can forget about. I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started. And I think, JD, we can say that. Do you have a statement on that? You've been very much involved. I gave him the beauty.
Great. Maybe the hardest question, sir. I mean, look, as the president said, we're not going to do the negotiation in public with the American media. He's going to do it in private with the president of Russia, with the president of Ukraine, and with other leaders. And I think that's how this has to go. I think I just want to push back against some of the criticism I've seen of the administration on this, because every single time the president engages in diplomacy, You guys preemptively accuse him of conceding to Russia. He hasn't conceded anything to anyone. He's doing the job of a diplomat, and he is, of course, the diplomat in chief as the President of the
Is
United States.
being worked out right now, and we're going to be very careful.
Will there be restrictions on, for instance, can Chinese nationals get
No,
one?
we're
Can
not gonna
Iranian
restrict-
nationals
We're
get
probably not going to be restricting too much in terms of countries, but maybe in terms of individuals. We want to make sure we have people that love our country and are capable of loving the country.
There's a measles outbreak in Texas at the moment in which a child is reported to have died. Do you have concerns about that, and have you asked Secretary Kennedy to look into that?
Well, why don't we, Bobby, do you want to speak on that?
Well, we are following the measles epidemic every day. I think there's 124 people who have contracted measles at this point, mainly in Gaines County, Texas. Mainly, we're told in the Mennonite community, there are 2 people who have died, but we're watching it, and there are about 20 people hospitalized, mainly for quarantine. We're watching it. We put out a post on it yesterday, and we're going to continue to follow it. Incidentally, there have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
You sound a little under the weather yourself right now.
I have a permanently bad throat.
The coughing.
Mr. President, would you send U.S. peacekeepers to support the European peacekeepers? Would you do any sort of U.S.
No, we're going to support Europe, yeah.
And how would we do
We're
that?
very friendly with Europe. We have a great relationship with Europe. I mean, you could you could talk about France, you could talk about any of them. I mean, we have a great relationship with Europe.
But how will the United States do that? Would there be boots on the
I
field?
mean, you're asking me a question, what are we doing in the field? Let's worry. I hope we have that problem where we could worry about peacekeeping. We got to get there first, but I hope we have the problem of worrying about peacekeeping. That'll be the easiest problem, I think, JD, that we've ever had.
That would be part of the deal, presumably, that the Ukrainians would
We'll
want.
do it at the time, but peacekeeping is very easy. It's making the deal that's very tough. And again, nobody was speaking to Russia at all. And, probably 1.5 million soldiers have been killed, close to 1.5 million soldiers, not to mention a tremendous. I will tell you, the thing with that horrible war that should have never started would have never started if I were president. And it didn't start for 4 years, and it was not even thought about starting. But the thing with that war is that you're highly underestimating the number of people that have been killed. Far more people have been killed in that war than you talk about. You like to talk about numbers like 1 million people. Well, they had much more than 1 million soldiers killed. But you have a lot of cities that have been knocked to the ground. They're demolition sites, literally demolition sites. Every single building is knocked to the ground. And a lot of people were killed in those buildings. And you'll hear a report, 2 people were minorly injured or just injured a little bit. No, people were killed by the thousands. And there are a lot more people killed in that war than the media wants to talk about, because Biden did a horrible, horrible job. He should have prevented that war. He could have prevented that war. Putin would have never gone in. I'll tell you one thing. He would have never gone in. That war would never have taken place if I were president.
I think what people are trying to understand, Mr. President, is how would the United States, what would you be willing to do to support this European peacekeeping effort? Would there be...
Again, you're asking me the same question. How many times do you have to answer? You're talking about after we make peace. Let me make peace first. Once we make peace, I'll give you all the answers you want. But how many times can you ask the same question?
Is loosening of sanctions
Is
loosening of sanctions on Russia a potential option as part of an overall deal?
No. We have sanctions on Russia. No, I want to see if we make a deal first, but I think we will. I've had very good conversations with President Putin. I've had very good conversations with President Zelensky, and until 4 weeks ago, nobody had conversations with anybody. It wasn't even a consideration. Nobody thought you could make peace. I think you can.
But if Putin gets to keep the land that was claimed by force, if the Russians get to keep the territory that they claim by force, doesn't that send a dangerous message, let's say, to China about Taiwan?
Okay. You try and take it away, right? We're gonna do the best we can. We're gonna do the best we can to make the best deal we can for both sides, but for Ukraine, we're going to try very hard to make a good deal so that they can get as much back as possible. We want to get as much back as possible.
Mr. President, just to bring this full
We'll cut it out after maybe this question. Go ahead.
to bring this full circle
Unless it's a
back
bad
to
question, then we'll take it.
back to a question.
You always like to finish on a good one.
Sir, they want you to negotiate with them instead of with President Putin.
Back to a question
about the peacekeepers. Then you have a lot of confidence in us because you assume there's going to be peace. You know, it's possible it doesn't work out. There is possibility, but I hope it does for the sake of humanity. Because if you look at the pictures that I've looked at, you don't want to look at them. Go ahead.
I had a question back on these cuts to the federal workforce. You mentioned you're interested in doing another round of this email. When would you like to see that? What would be the deadline? And this time, would it be mandatory?
I think Elon wants to, and I think it's a good idea because, you know, those people, as I said before, they're on the bubble. You got a lot of people that have not responded, so we're trying to figure out, do they exist? Who are they? And it's possible that a lot of those people will be actually fired. And if that happened, that's okay, because that's what we're trying to do. This country has gotten bloated and fat and disgusting and incompetently run. I think we had the worst president in the history of our country. He just left office. I think he's a disgrace, what he's done to our country by allowing millions of people to come into our country like that. And all of the other things, the inflation, which he caused because of energy and stupid spending, to spend hundreds of millions, trillions and trillions of dollars on the Green New scam, a total scam. I have the best energy people, the best environmental people in the world around this table, and they can't even believe he got away with it. And then in leaving office to send $20 billion here and $20 million there and 10 million and 5 million, and they couldn't spend the money fast enough, and let's get it out before Trump gets in, let's just get it out to anybody. This is a disgrace to our nation, and you don't write the fair thing, but look, you know, the good news, the people see it, and that's why we won the election by so much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. I'll right back here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pulitzer Prize.
Sir, how many peacekeepers are you going to send there?
What will you do? How will you dress? Lawrence, look at Lawrence. This guy's making a fortune. He never had it so good. Lawrence, say we did a great job, please. Okay? Say it was unbelievable.